You know, you hear these acronyms all the time. The UN, the WHO, the IMF, they're just kind of the background noise of the global news, right? We hear about their big summits, their resolutions, but it all feels, well, pretty distant, like some bureaucratic world that doesn't really affect us. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain. What are these powerful international organizations, really? And how do they actually shape our world?
Okay, so let's just start with the biggest question of all. I mean, one that sounds almost impossible to answer. How in the world do you get 195 different countries, every single one with its own agenda, its own politics, to actually work together? Especially on these huge, planet-sized problems like a pandemic or climate change. I mean, think about it. It sounds like a riddle, but that riddle, that's the exact reason these international organizations even exist.
All right, so if these organizations are the big solution, we got to be super clear on what they are. What does it even mean for an organization to be international?
So the easiest way to think about an international organization, or an IO for short, is like a formal club for countries. Seriously, they're set up by treaties between nations, all to chase after some common goals. But here's the crucial part. They have their own legal identity. That means they can operate independently from any single member country. That's a huge deal. And you gotta know there's a really important distinction here. We're talking two main types. First, you've got intergovernmental organizations, IGOs. Think the UN. Their members are only national governments. Simple. But then you have international non-governmental organizations, INGOs. Think the Red Cross or Amnesty International. Their membership can include individuals and private groups, which, as you can imagine, gives them a totally different kind of power and reach on the world stage.
Okay, which brings us to the next big question, right? Why even bother? Why go through all the trouble of setting up these massive, complex, global groups? What's the point?
Well, it really just boils down to one simple fact. Some problems are just way too big for any single country to solve on its own. I mean, think about it. Preventing wars, managing a global pandemic, even just making sure it's safe to fly from one country to another. These are problems that literally don't care about borders. So, these IOs, they create the framework, the agreed-upon rules of the road, so countries can actually tackle these things together.
Okay, so we've covered what they are and why they exist. But how do they actually work? You know, how do they go from a fancy mission statement to getting things done in the real world? Let's dig into the mechanics.
It really all boils down to a pretty simple three-step dance. Step 1, obligations. This is where countries agree to the rules of the club. Step 2, compliance. That means they actually have to follow the rules they just agreed to. And step 3, enforcement. This is what happens when they don't. The organization has ways to make sure the rules are followed.
So let's zoom in on that first step, obligations. What is a country actually signing up for? Well, it's not just one thing. Legally, they're committing to treaties, like the UN Charter. Financially, yep, they have to pay their dues to keep the lights on. Politically, they're supposed to support the organization's big goals. And then there's the practical side. They have to cooperate, share data, and actually show up for the meetings. It's the whole package.
Now, that next step, compliance, this is where it gets interesting, because it's mostly about choice. Most of the time, countries follow the rules voluntarily. Why? Because they've done the math. They've figured out that the benefits of being a member in good standing, we're talking better trade, more security, a bigger voice on the world stage, are worth more than the hassle of following the rules. It's a constant calculation. Is it worth it?
And really, that's the key takeaway right there. Compliance isn't just about dodging a penalty. It's about getting the rewards. Playing by the rules of the game opens doors, it builds trust with other nations, and it gives you a much bigger say in how things are run.
But what happens when a country just decides not to play by the rules? Well, that's where enforcement comes in. And these IOs have a whole toolbox they can reach into. They can use legal tools, like the UN Security Council slapping on economic sanctions that can absolutely crush an economy. They've got economic tools, like the World Trade Organization greenlighting tariffs. And then there's political pressure, basically calling a country out on the world stage, using diplomacy and the media. Public shaming can be a surprisingly powerful tool.
And this brings us to an absolutely critical point. While lots of organizations can apply pressure, the final, ultimate enforcement tool, we're talking the legal right to authorize military force, that is held by one group and one group only, the United Nations Security Council. That concentration of power gives it a unique and, honestly, a kind of terrifying authority in the world.
Okay,
So when you talk about obligations and compliance, and especially enforcement, you run straight into the single biggest, most difficult issue at the heart of all of this, the clash with a nation's own power, its sovereignty.
Because here's the thing. Joining the club, cooperating on the world stage, it always comes with a price.
So let me break down how that works. When a country joins an IO, it's agreeing to follow a set of rules that it can't just change whenever it wants. Right away, that limits its freedom. It can also lead to what a lot of people see as meddling in their internal business, like when the IMF tells a country in crisis how to run its economy. At the end of the day, it just means a country isn't 100% free to do whatever it wants anymore. It always has to think about its promises to the rest of the world.
And all of this really leads us to the main idea we need to wrap our heads around. This isn't about choosing sovereignty or a cooperation. It's about something much trickier, finding the right balance.
This right here, this is the great balancing act of our time. Every single nation, every single day, is on this tightrope. On one side, you have their own power to make their own decisions, their sovereignty. On the other, you have the huge benefits you get from working with other countries. And it's not a problem you can just solve once and be done with it. It's a constant tension that has to be managed, day in and day out.
And that leaves us with a question that is probably going to define our entire century. Look around. Our shared crises, pandemics, climate change, you name it, they're only getting more intense. That means the need for cooperation is only going to get bigger. So the real question for all of us is, where do you draw that line? The line between one country's self-interest and the needs of the entire world.